Have you ever wondered what it truly means to be alone in the forest? The silence of towering trees, the shivering cold air, and the unseen presence of the wild often create an atmosphere that is both calming and deeply unsettling. Tonight, we step into the shadowy heart of nature, where whispers linger in the night, and fear becomes more real than the firelight that tries to keep it away. This is not just a campfire tale meant to scare children. It is an account that has been told and retold, each time with trembling voices and haunted eyes. It begins with a small group of friends who decided to go camping far from civilization, seeking adventure and the purity of untouched wilderness. But what they found was something else entirely. The night was calm at first. The fire cracked softly, and the forest seemed to breathe with them. They laughed, roasted marshmallows, and talked about old memories, their voices echoing faintly among the trees. The comfort of companionship was strong enough to make them forget how far they were from safety. But when midnight came, the forest changed. The wind fell silent. Even the crickets stopped chirping, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. It was in that silence, heavy and suffocating, that they heard it. A whisper. At first, they thought it was just the sound of the fire shifting, or the trick of the breeze brushing against the leaves. But then, it came again. A clear, deliberate whisper that seemed to come from the darkness beyond their tents. It was too soft to make out the words, but it was undeniably human. One of them, Jake, stood up and laughed nervously.
"Probably just the wind,"
he said, trying to dismiss it. But deep down, everyone knew the wind does not call your name. Yes, that was the most terrifying part, because soon the whisper grew bolder, closer, and each time it carried fragments of their names spoken softly, almost lovingly, yet dripping with an unnatural chill. Fear spread among the group. Some wanted to grab their lanterns and search the woods, while others begged to stay put, insisting that no good ever comes from chasing the unknown. In the end, they chose to remain by the fire, telling themselves it would protect them. But the firelight only seemed to make the surrounding darkness feel thicker, more alive. And then, the whispers began circling them, moving left to right, behind and ahead, as though unseen figures were pacing around their small circle of light. One of the girls, Anna, began crying softly, clutching her knees to her chest.
"It's not possible,"
she murmured.
"No one should be here. We hiked for hours. There's no one out there, right?"
But the truth was undeniable. Something, or someone, was with them in the woods that night. What they did not yet know was that the whispers were only the beginning. The minutes dragged like hours. Every crackle of the fire, every rustle of leaves, felt magnified in their ears. They huddled closer together, watching the edges of the darkness as if expecting shapes to emerge at any moment. Then, something happened that froze the blood in their veins. The whispers began to overlap. At first, it was a single voice, soft, deliberate, almost intimate. But now, multiple voices joined in, layered upon each other like a chorus of hushed tones. Some sounded male, others female, and some didn't sound human at all. They murmured in rhythms, their words unintelligible, but the intent was clear. They were not alone. Jake, the one who tried to act brave earlier, grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the woods. The beam cut through the trees, shaking slightly with his trembling hand. For a split second, his light caught something two small reflections, like eyes, glinting back at him from the shadows.
"Did you see that?"
he shouted, his voice cracking. But by the time the others turned to look, the eyes were gone. Only branches swayed gently, as though mocking their fear.
"Stop it, Jake.
Anna pleaded, tears streaking her face.
Don't make it worse."
But the truth was already written on all of their expressions. The fear was consuming them. The forest had shifted from a place of beauty to a stage for something they could not understand. And then, the whispers spoke louder. For the first time, the words were clear.
Why are you here?
It was whispered so close, so directly, that they all gasped in unison. It felt as if someone had leaned between them, speaking into their ears, though no one was there. One of the boys, Chris, jumped to his feet, waving his flashlight wildly.
Who's out there? Show yourself.
His voice cracked with desperation. Silence. Then another voice, softer, almost playful.
Leave or stay forever.
The group's panic escalated. They argued about packing up and leaving immediately, but fear of wandering in the pitch-black forest stopped them. Their car was parked miles away down a trail that seemed endless even in daylight. At night, under the suffocating weight of unseen eyes, the thought of walking through those woods felt like walking into a trap. So they made the decision to stay until morning, but staying meant enduring the whispers that did not cease, not even for a breath. Hour after hour, the unseen voices circled them, closer and closer, until it felt like the darkness itself was pressing against their skin. Some whispered their names, some laughed faintly, some repeated words over and over, like an eerie chant. And just when exhaustion threatened to make them collapse, Anna suddenly gasped. She pointed toward the tree line.
Do you see that?
The others turned, and their hearts nearly stopped. There, just beyond the reach of the firelight, stood a tall, shadowy figure, perfectly still, perfectly silent, watching. The fire flickered. The shadows danced, but the figure did not move. It was real, and it was waiting. The figure stood motionless at the edge of the fire's glow, shrouded in darkness so thick it seemed to drink the light. At first, they thought it might be a trick of the mind, fear twisting the shadows into something human. But the longer they stared, the more undeniable it became. It was there, watching, waiting. Jake raised his flashlight again, his hand trembling so hard the beam shook across the trees. For a brief moment, the light passed over the figure, yet instead of revealing a face, it only deepened the void. The figure absorbed the light, its outline sharp against the trees, but no features could be seen. Anna whispered through her tears.
It doesn't have a face.
The moment she said it, the whispers returned louder, angrier, as if mocking her words. They rose and fell in a chorus, wrapping around the group in an invisible grip. The air grew heavier, colder, until every breath felt like breathing ice. Chris tried to be brave.
Stay back! Leave us alone!
He shouted, throwing a rock toward the figure. But the shadow didn't flinch. It didn't move at all. Instead, the rock disappeared into the darkness, and then came the sound. A laugh. Low, drawn out, almost human but warped, as though the forest itself was laughing at them. The figure began to move, slowly, step by step, closer to the circle of firelight. With each movement, the whispers swelled, filling their ears, pressing into their skulls like invisible hands. Panic surged through the group. Jake and Chris held up flashlights, shaking beams of light that seemed too weak against the advancing shadow. Anna clutched her friend, sobbing uncontrollably, while another girl muttered prayers under her breath. And then, as the figure reached the very edge of the fire's light, it stopped. For the first time, they all saw it clearly. It was tall, far taller than any person should be. Its limbs were too long, hanging awkwardly at its sides. Its skin, or what looked like skin, was pale and smooth, but where a face should have been, there was only emptiness. A blank canvas, featureless and cold. The fire cracked loudly, as if recoiling from the sight. No one spoke. No one breathed. Then, the whispers stopped. Complete. The sudden absence of sound was more terrifying than the voices themselves. The forest seemed to hold its breath again, as though waiting for something unspeakable to happen. Finally, the faceless figure tilted its head slowly, unnaturally, as if studying them like prey. And then, without warning, it vanished. Not into the trees, not into the shadows. It simply blinked out of existence, dissolving into the night air like mist. For a long moment, the group sat frozen, unable to believe their eyes. And just as the faintest flicker of relief began to creep in, Anna's face went pale. Because from behind her, just inches away, came a new whisper. This time, it was clear, and it said her name.
Anna.
The whisper was so close it tickled her ear. She screamed and spun around, but there was no one behind her, only the darkness pressing against the light of the fire. Her scream sent the group into chaos. Flashlights flickered wildly, casting frantic beams into the trees, but the woods gave nothing back.
Pack up, we're leaving now.
Chris shouted, his voice breaking. Their hands shook as they scrambled for their gear, but in their panic, simple tasks became impossible. Tent poles refused to collapse, bags wouldn't zip, and every second felt like hours. All the while, the whispers returned, circling them, louder than ever. Some voices laughed, some cried, some mimicked their own voices, repeating their words with mocking precision.
Stop it! Stop it!
Jake yelled, clutching his ears. But no matter how hard he pressed his hands against his head, the whispers burrowed inside. Then the fire sputtered. Sparks flew into the night air as the flames shrank, choking down into a weak glow. The shadows crept closer, as though hungry, feeding on the dying light. And that was when they saw them. Not one figure, not two, but dozens. Shapes emerged from the tree line, faceless and tall, swaying unnaturally as they stepped closer. Their movements were slow, deliberate, yet they seemed to glide rather than walk. The firelight caught on their pale, featureless heads, revealing smooth voids where eyes and mouths should have been. Anna dropped to her knees, trembling uncontrollably.
This can't be real. This can't be real.
Chris grabbed her arm, dragging her up.
Run! Forget the tents.
They bolted into the woods, their flashlights bouncing wildly as they tore through the underbrush. Branches whipped against their faces, roots clawed at their ankles, but fear drove them forward. Behind them, the whispers grew into a maddening chorus, echoing in every direction. No matter where they turned, the voices followed.
Don't leave. Stay with us. You're already ours.
Anna stumbled, nearly falling, but Jake caught her, pulling her back up. They didn't dare look behind them, but the sounds made it clear. The faceless figures were giving chase. After what felt like hours, their lungs burning, they burst into a small clearing. Moonlight spilled onto the grass, offering a fragile sense of safety. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, clutching at each other as if to prove they were still alive. For a moment, the forest was silent again. No whispers, no footsteps, only the thundering of their own hearts. Jake dared to laugh nervously, trying to mask his terror.
We lost them!
He panted.
They're gone!
But then, from the edge of the clearing, came the sound of a single step. The group froze. Their flashlights swung toward the sound, hands shaking. And standing there, at the edge of the moonlight, was the faceless figure. It tilted its head slowly, and behind it, more shapes emerged from the shadows. They hadn't escaped at all. They had been herded. The clearing that had seemed like salvation only moments before now felt like a trap, a stage lit by the pale glow of the moon. All around its edges, the faceless figures stood in silence, encircling the group like predators closing in on their prey. Jake's breathing grew ragged as he swept his flashlight in frantic arcs, but no matter where he pointed, the beam caught on more pale, featureless heads swaying in the darkness. There were too many of them. Anna's voice cracked as she whispered,
What do they want from us?
No one answered, but deep down, each of them already knew. The figures began to move forward, slowly, their long limbs carrying them with unnatural grace. The ground seemed to shudder under their steps, though no sound should have come from such measured movements. With every inch they advanced, the circle of safety grew smaller. Chris, desperate, grabbed a heavy branch from the ground and brandished it like a weapon.
Stay back!
He yelled. His voice was raw, his hands shaking so badly the branch wobbled.
We're not afraid of you!
But the lie was obvious. Everyone could feel the terror radiating from his words. And then, for the first time, one of the faceless things spoke not in a whisper, but in a hollow, echoing voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once.
You came here to listen.
The words hung in the air, vibrating through their bones.
Listen to what?
Jake demanded, though his voice cracked with fear. The figure tilted its head again, and in unison, every single faceless creature echoed the same phrase, their voices overlapping until the forest shook with their chant.
Listen to us. Listen to us.
The group clutched their ears, falling to their knees as the sound overwhelmed them. It wasn't just noise, it was inside their skulls, pulsing in their veins, drowning out every thought. Anna screamed, her voice torn from her throat, but the chant only grew louder. Then, silence. The sudden stop was so sharp it left their ears ringing. When they looked up, the figures had stopped moving. The circle was still, watching, waiting. And then, the one closest to them stepped forward. Its limbs stretched unnaturally long, its shadow spilling across the clearing like ink. It reached out a pale, featureless hand toward Anna.
No!
Jake lunged, pulling her away, but as he did, something impossible happened. The faceless figure's arms stretched, elongating far beyond what should be possible, its hand gliding through the air like a serpent. Fingers without nails, without flesh, brushed against Anna's shoulder cold, damp, and heavy like stone. She convulsed. Her scream tore through the night as her body jerked violently, her eyes rolling back.
Anna!
Jake cried, holding on to her, but the moment he touched her, he too felt it, the whisper crawling inside his head, not from the outside anymore, but from within. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was inside them, and it was hungry. Jake's body trembled as the whispers flooded his mind. They were no longer distant, no longer circling the group they were inside him. His thoughts were no longer his own. They came in waves, voices that were both strange and familiar, overlapping until he could no longer tell which were his.
Stay. You belong here. Become one of us.
He clutched his head, screaming, but the sound was swallowed by the chant inside. His friends tried to pull him back, but every time they touched him, the same cold surge ran through their skin, crawling beneath the flesh like ice water. Anna's body jerked again, her voice twisting unnaturally, words escaping her lips that weren't hers.
They've always been here, waiting for us. We are the echoes of those who never left.
The clearing pulsed with that horrible truth. The faceless figures swayed in unison, their heads tilting with each whispered echo, as if Anna had become their mouthpiece. Chris shook her violently, desperate to break her free.
Fight it, Anna! Don't let them in!
But her eyes were gone. Only white emptiness stared back at him. Panic surged. They had no choice. They had to escape, or none of them would survive. Chris shouted at the others.
Run! Head for the trail! Now!
They bolted through a gap in the circle. The faceless figures didn't chase immediately. They simply watched, as though amused by the desperate scramble. Their whispers rose again, following the group through the forest. Branches tore at their skin, roots clawed at their feet, and the darkness pressed down heavier than before. The moonlight vanished under thick clouds, leaving them in suffocating blackness. Their flashlights flickered, then died, one after another. Jake stumbled, collapsing to the ground, his chest heaving. He couldn't hear his own breathing anymore. Only the whispers. They told him to stop running, to give in, to join them. But Chris grabbed him, dragging him forward.
Don't listen. They're not real. Keep moving.
Yet deep down, they all knew the truth. The figures were real. Too real. And their hunger was endless. Finally, through the darkness, they saw it, the faint glimmer of the trailhead, the path that would lead back to their car. Salvation was so close, they could almost taste it. But just as hope returned, the ground beneath Anna gave way. She screamed as she was yanked backward into the shadows. Jake and Chris turned, their hearts breaking as they saw her body dragged across the dirt, faceless figures pulling her into the blackness. Her screams echoed until they were suddenly cut short. And then, silence. Jake froze, his entire body numb. He wanted to run to her, to save her, but the forest had swallowed her whole. Chris pulled at him, shouting,
We can't save her. We have to go.
With tears streaming down his face, Jake stumbled after him. They ran, the whispers pursuing them like a storm, louder and louder, until it seemed the entire forest was alive with voices. And just when it felt like they would be consumed, they broke through the tree line. Their car was there, sitting silently under the pale light of the moon. They threw themselves inside, slamming the doors shut, fumbling with shaking hands to start the engine. The whispers pounded against the glass, pressing into their skulls. But finally, the car roared to life. With screeching tires, they sped down the dirt road, not daring to look back. For the first time all night, there was silence. But silence was no comfort. Because Jake realized, as the road stretched endlessly before them, that one whisper still lingered in his mind. Not outside, not around him, but inside him. And it said only one thing.
You never left.
The dirt road twisted endlessly, headlights bouncing across trees that seemed to stretch forever. Chris kept his eyes locked forward, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Jake sat in silence, trembling, his eyes vacant as the forest blurred past. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the engine, straining, and their shallow breathing. It should have been relief escape, but something hung heavy in the car, thicker than the air outside. Finally, Chris broke the silence.
We made it. We're alive.
But Jake didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the rearview mirror, his lips moving soundlessly.
Jake, hey, look at me. We made it.
Slowly, Jake turned. His face was pale, his eyes glassy, and when he finally spoke, his voice wasn't his own.
They're still with us.
Chris's heart skipped.
What are you talking about?
Jake leaned closer, whispering words that chilled him to the bone.
Can't you hear them?
Chris froze. At first, there was only silence. But then, from the back seat, came the faintest murmur, a whisper, soft and patient, threading through the air like smoke. No, Chris whispered, his chest tightening. He dared a glance in the mirror. And in the reflection, bathed in the dim glow of the dashboard lights, sat a faceless figure, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Chris's scream tore through the night as the car swerved violently. Headlights cut across the trees, the world spinning, before everything went black. When rescuers found the wreck days later, the car was twisted against a tree, its doors flung wide open. But inside, there were no bodies, no blood, no sign of Jake, Chris, or Anna. Only a single backpack, lying on the forest floor nearby. Inside was a torn notebook, its pages scrawled with frantic handwriting. The last entry read, "We thought the fire would protect us. We thought the road would save us. But the whispers don't belong to the forest. They belong to us now. If you're reading this, don't listen when they call your name." And so, The legend of the night whispers in the woods continues. Some say the voices still echo in those trees, waiting for the next group of campers to wander too far from safety. Others believe that Jake, Chris, and Anna never died at all, that they became part of the whispers, bound to the shadows, forever calling out to anyone who dares to listen. So, the next time you find yourself deep in the wilderness and the night grows too quiet, pay attention. Because when the whispers begin, you'll know it's already too late. This is Darkwing Stories, and this was only the beginning.